It's a bit of a black pill what I'm about to say here, but
if you're somebody who's never questioned morality, you don't exist in my mind.
so immorality to me in a nutshell is the inability or perhaps even a refusal to acknowledge when you've gone beyond that gray area into the clearly evil zones.
You're not free from your urges. So that could be Pornhub aspect, that could be the video game aspect, that could be anything. If you're just succumbing to all those urges without thinking, hey, is it morally okay for my worldview? The answer is always no, but you don't think about it. You just say it's my urge. I'm just jumping right into it and it doesn't hurt anybody, quote unquote. It secretly is hurting me over time.
If you've never really dug into this question and tried to answer it for yourself, like what do I believe is right or wrong? What is my moral code? If some new situation comes up, how will I address it and determine what's right or wrong about it? If you've never done that for yourself, then you are a postmodernist. What happens when people don't consciously define their moral principles? What happens when they're just floating through life, doing whatever they feel is best, and never really digging into it or questioning it? I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, no. So if you're somebody who's never questioned morality, you don't exist in my mind. Because unfortunately, I actually believe that everyone has questioned morality in some way, but not in a way, maybe not in the way that like a deep dive, right? So when you are, I think it's baked into your biology. I think that on some level, when you're 5-6 years old, the first time you do something wrong and you feel like a little bit of a guilt, right? Mm-hmm. The first time you do something wrong to another person. Like I remember distinctly when I was 7 years old, I kind of bullied some kid once for the first time ever at a water fountain. And I immediately felt this weird, I immediately felt like this, something was wrong about that. Mm-hmm. I'm 6 years old, so nobody told me, and I never thought, I never sat there and thought, well, per Kant and per Nietzsche, I should probably not push this kid into the water fountain, right? But I didn't think that at 6 years old. I couldn't. So my point is, it's kind of not an answer to your question. It's more of it's a little clever kind of non-answer, but I'm not answering it with, I don't believe that nobody's ever thought about that. But if you don't double click on it in some way, it could lead to, in my mind, the postmodern style where you say, hey, I don't actually have to think about if something's good or bad. I'm just going to think about my urges, right? And if you just succumb to all your urges, you're going to be not free. And by not free, I mean you're not free from your urges, right? So that could be the Pornhub aspect, that could be the video game aspect, that could be anything. If you're just succumbing to all those urges without thinking, hey, is this actually morally okay? And by morally okay, I don't mean is it morally okay to God. I'm saying it from a material perspective. Is it morally okay for my worldview? The answer is always no, but you don't think about it. You just say it's my urge. I'm just jumping right into it, and it doesn't hurt anybody, quote unquote. But it secretly is hurting me over time. So that's my answer there. So
yeah,
we'll go back to you on that.
I think that was a good answer. And honestly, it's funny you mentioned like bullying a kid for the first time was your introduction, because I honestly have the same story, which is hilarious because we didn't talk about that. I don't know if we've ever talked about that, but we've known each other for like 15 years. That's never come up, but we have the same story. Yeah, I did the same thing. Well, I think it was a little more justified in my case. Like there was this kid who like snitched on me on the bus, right? I did something really wrong. Right. He snitched on me to the bus driver. So I had to show him what's what, And here's the thing: he's a smaller kid, a weaker kid than me, and he's very passive. I knew he probably wouldn't fight me back, but I feel like I had no choice but to go, fight him. So I did, and I felt terrible afterwards, man, because you know what? He didn't fight back. Like I wish he did, because at the time I wish he fought back, because then it would have been a fight instead of me just like beating him up. And like he really just wanted me to stop. Even thinking back, it's like I almost feel a little bit of PTSD about it, because I felt so like evil in that moment. Like I was just beating up this kid who wasn't fighting back. He's asking me to stop, right? And I just kept going. I mean, I didn't hurt him that badly. I was 8 years old, so it wasn't like it didn't go crazy. But anyway, so that's what happened. And man, just the feeling afterwards was so weird.
Vitriolic, if you will, right?
Yeah, and just towards myself, like it was like my
self-hatred, like what have I done?
Yes, and like looking out, but at the same time, I'm trying to justify it to myself. Like I'm like, man, this feels bad, but I had to, right? Like I had to stick up for myself. He snitched on me, right? I had a right to do that, but it didn't feel good, and I just knew it was wrong. So that was my first encounter with it. Obviously,
introduction to it, right?
I was 8, so I didn't have the capacity to get any further into it. But as I got older, I definitely did. So Now, what happens when people don't consciously define their moral principles? You mentioned it, and I'll just echo what you said. It will lead you down the paths that other people want you to follow. So maybe an important reason to read Nietzsche, now that we're here, is Nietzsche does define the concept of will to power. And one thing he makes clear is that if you don't define your own worldview and rise with the power to enforce it, at least in your immediate area, somebody else is going to, right? You're going to be under someone's thumb, and it should be your own. You should make it your own. But if you don't have like if you don't have a perspective, then you're sort of everywhere, you know. And whatever way the wind is blowing, that's where you're going to end up, right? You're going to end up as a post. In fact, that is what a postmodernist is. It's somebody with no perspective, and so that's what you are. If you've never really dug into this question and tried to answer it for yourself, like what do I believe is right or wrong? What is my moral code? If some new situation comes up, how will I address it and determine what's right or wrong about it? If you've never done that for yourself, then you are a postmodernist, and you're going every which way. You're going every which direction. Right. It will lead you into evil. So I have another question I want to ask that's related to this, and then I have something to say about it, but I'll ask you first. Yeah. So if morality is real, and we both agree it is, and if we I assume we both agree it's important, what does it mean to be immoral? What is immorality then?
Yeah. And again, from my perspective on here, without invoking divine command, this is a hard question to answer, but it's, for me, I view it as, if there's something that's morally good, to me, I think that that's something that's good for the well-being of you and good for the well-being of society without hurting the well-being of society, right? So it's almost a utilitarian categorical imperative blend, but it's an easy answer for it to be evil, or to be immoral rather, is, sorry, jumping the gun on that. It's something that's the contrary positive to that, right? So that would be something that is bad for the well-being of the society, or bad for the aggregate well-being of you and your community, right? Or something that makes, in Kant's words, that makes society not functional. So for me, it's that's a way to define it. But there's also another layer of it, is that I don't sit there and think, okay, is this good for society? Is this good for me when I do things, right? Yeah. It's more of a gut feeling that I kind of know from the top down, and then can later use bottom up explanations to rationalize good behaviors. And I try to double click on them all the time, because I want to introspect and think, am I just coping here? Or am I using my logic and reason as an excuse to do this thing I want to do that's actually, I know that I can know is bad? Yeah. But in these cases, it's kind of a feeling that I know. And it's like when you go to court, there's a certain legalese term kind of with regards to something that's sexual in nature. So when they're talking about something like, you can't have anything that's sexual in nature, or whatever have you, on maybe in certain aspects of certain societies. Mm-hmm. And they don't define that on purpose. They define that strictly as, you know it when you see it. Yeah. And that's kind of how I view the feeling that comes to me when I do something wrong. But you can't live your life on just that feeling. You have to double click and introspect and go from there, as well as couple the feeling. I'm just saying the feeling is a proxy for me. It maps 1-to-1 so far on what actually is wrong, and from a categorical imperative and from a utilitarian perspective as well. Except with the exceptions on the utilitarian aspect, because I'm not fully saying that that's 100% map to 1, because there's too many things there with the trolley problem that you and I would disagree with them. So that's I'll leave it at that for now, and see if you're satisfied with that. But I'd love you to kind of do an internal critique if you want. I mean, it's your call.
Well, it's funny, because I was going to say that we pretty much agree on this, right? And even as a Christian, immorality is not always obvious, and morality, the converse is true too. It's not always obvious. Even though we do believe God is giving us divine command, we still have, the world is very complicated, and not everything is going to be in the Bible, and not everything is going to be something that somebody else has encountered exactly before. So you're going to encounter situations where, the right and the wrong is very gray, and it's very difficult to determine, and it becomes quite neutral. And so that's sort of the gray area of what makes immoral. It's not always obvious. There is a gray area there, but there is also the part where it's much clearer, right? The very clear lines between good and evil. And now my perspective is that the devil, or evil, and I'm just going to say the devil because that's in my equivalent, the devil uses those gray areas to push you further towards the dark ones, right? So an example of this, in my view, is what we were just talking about. If you going through your life without really ever seriously questioning your own moral compass, that is a sin. You're doing something wrong. That's a bad thing for you, right? And I think Tony would agree with that. It's going to lead you in different directions. In and of itself, it's not like clearly evil. Like I wouldn't call you evil because you've never investigated your own worldview. I would just say you're sort of lacking in a certain respect. But it leads you to evil, right? And I think I demonstrated that before, where if you're a postmodernist with no perspective, you're going to end up telling the little kid who wants to cut their genitals off that they should do it, and you're going to go help them do it, right? That's what you're going to end up doing. So the devil uses these little gray areas to push you towards evil, and so that's why you need to be able to recognize when you've gone that far. As I said, you may end up in a gray area and make the wrong choice, and it will become clear later that you kind of screwed up, right? The key is to recognize that as soon as possible, and then make steps to fix it, to repent in the Christian worldview. So obviously another key aspect of the Christian worldview is that you're always going to make mistakes. You're a human being. You are totally flawed. So you need to have forgiveness for yourself and seek forgiveness from God, who will always forgive you no matter what you've done, and be able to forgive yourself, but then be able to repent and try to make things right. So immorality, to me, in a nutshell, is the inability, or perhaps even a refusal, to acknowledge when you've gone beyond that gray area into the clearly evil zones, right? Mm-hmm. Like I wouldn't call you immoral because you ran the stoplight. Right? I mean, that's an immoral thing to do. I wouldn't call you evil, is what I should say. I wouldn't call you evil because you ran the stoplight. But it's obvious how that could lead to something that is truly evil. Like maybe you ran over a pedestrian because you're an idiot and you didn't look at the stoplight, right? So recognize when you're doing something that's going to push you that far, make the steps to fix it, and a refusal to do that is what makes something really immoral, in my view.
Right. And yeah, I mean, that's perfectly well said, because to me that is a explanation of it using like a spiritual and a religious background to explain it, but it doesn't require it the way you explained it, right? You explained it in a way that doesn't require the spiritual framework of it. But and we could double click on the example you gave, but I don't think it's worth it to do that right now, because that's I could see myself going an hour on why it's not morally wrong for you to run a stop sign, and we alluded to that earlier. That's neither here nor there, because I think that there's a really important thing here is like, okay, why does any of this matter? Like, is morality something that is supposed to be okay? So when I say morality is what you should do, like, do you agree with that in some way?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you ask the question, what should I do? The answer to that is morality, right? Like, okay, based on morality, you should do this. Based on morality, you should not do this. So when people make laws, should they be using morality as a way to make laws? And are they? Does that make sense for society?
Okay. Sure. Should, yes. We ought to. We ought to use morality as a basis for laws. Do we? I think in principle we do, but right. I think that it's not a one-to-one correlation.
Right.
Like, many of our laws are simply to help rich people get richer, right? Which, if anything, is immoral. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, in principle, we should do that, and I would say that's, again, in principle, that's what the law is like a codification of morality, of the society's morality. But
it's the public narrative is that that's what it is. But as you just pointed out, there's the people who have the power have corrupted themselves.
Right.
They're now corrupt, and they actually write laws to benefit themselves with, benefit the oligarchs, etc. But the reason I'm asking that is because some people don't even agree that that the law should be a map from morality to prescription of what you should do legally. And there's always this, and this is why I always have to make this distinction, saying, okay, do I agree with it legally, or do I agree with it morally, right? Yeah. And for me, I don't care if something's legal or not, right? And I'm not going to give you a disclaimer because I don't care. You can take this as legal advice. You can. Go ahead, take this as legal advice. I don't give a shit. I actually don't care. Take this as legal advice. I don't care if something's legal or illegal, okay? Unless I'm in the context of do I want to get in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Or not. Because to me, I don't allow Uncle Sam to tell me what's morally acceptable, right? To me, I don't care about that. I have my own version of it, and that's postmodern. You can say, oh, it's postmodern. You have your own version. No. I have already, in my mind, come up with a moral framework for myself that's better than jaywalking is morally wrong. That's better than monopolies existing is morally wrong. I don't care about any of that stuff. That's legalese.
Right.
That's all stuff for people to. It's a different scope, different conversation. But I'm bringing it into this because I want to point this out. It's really important to me to say, hey, the people that are pretending to be in power when they wear their fake suits and they dress up and they go, the 538 folks that do the votes on how much money we should, is it 400 billion or 105 billion to Ukraine?
Yeah.
That's not reflective of anything. That's so disconnected with me at all that I'm not even going to pretend. I'm withdrawing consent from that system, right?
Yeah.
So I know it at one point in 1776, that may commence again, but in 1776, like, yeah, it was, I really do believe that's what it was. It was 1776 said, hey, morality is the law. And we are I think it's an argument can be made that we are a Christian nation. That's kind of what they didn't say, but they implied and said in some ways. Yeah. But everyone always likes to say, well, it's, separation of churches. My point is they had Christian values, whatever. So at the time, I really believe that at that point, that was the starting point. And ever since that day, July 4th, 1776, we've been going so far away from what like our map of laws to morality has gone so far away from the origin of it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We're really on a path to degeneracy, and I would like you to kind of give your input on that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So I mentioned St. Augustine and the city of God, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't read it. I'm not going to pretend I've read it. I know what it's about, which is why I talked about it. But the idea is that anything made by men is going to degrade over time. By the way, it's hailing here, so I'm sorry if that's in the background.
No, I can't hear it. I can't hear it.
Good. It should be fine. But anyway, anything that's made by men is going to degrade over time because we are imperfect and we will make mistakes. The only true way to eternity is by following God. It's a bit of a black pill what I'm about to say here, but the country is always destined to fall, right? As the United States of America, as much as I love it, will not last forever. It will not last forever. It was created in a moment of genius, and I think that the Constitution is one of the most remarkable legal documents ever created. Like the system of government that these dudes came up with is nearly perfect. But I don't think anything could ever actually be perfect if it's created by men. So they got really, really close, but there's no way they could have predicted all these little ways that we'd find to break it. And if you see that the society that we live in now, with the political system, the way that it works today, I wouldn't say it's unrecognizable. It would be unrecognizable to them, but they would recognize it as a bastardization of what they had come up with, right? We don't really respect the spirit of the Constitution in many respects, right? And I think the key reason is that we have gone further and further away from the foundational principles. This is a Christian nation. Every founder, every person who was involved in the foundation of the country was a Protestant Christian European, right? Maybe there was some atheists.
Caveat of 2% of the top leaders were deists, but that's whatever.
Yes.
Everyone quotes that, but yeah.
Right, but largely, and especially in terms of the population, the vast majority were European Protestant Christians. That is the spirit of this country, like it or not. I'm not even a Protestant, right? So it hurts me to admit this a little bit. But yes, they came up with this nearly perfect country. And now, if you ask, if the average, like, let's say, liberal had a conversation with the average founder of the country and they talked about like moral issues, the liberal Democrat would like spit on our founders. They would hate their guts if we talked about like gay marriage or, God, try to bring up transgenderism to George Washington.
Gun rights.
You would give him a stroke, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but like name anything. We're so far, and the conservatives are much closer. I mean, I think the conservatives still idolize the founding fathers to a degree, although I don't think we're exactly in line with them in many respects. But yes, I mean, I guess I'm just sort of saying in a longer way what you've already said, which is that we've really strayed so far from the original foundation of the country, and that's why we have so many problems. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, there's no way back.